Okay, we're going to talk about measuring with a graduated cylinder. When we're measuring with a graduated cylinder, that means we're measuring the volume, usually of a liquid. The units are usually going to be milliliters. If you have a really big graduated cylinder, you could measure in liters, but it's more likely that you're going to be measuring in milliliters. So here I have two pictures of the same graduated cylinder. Okay. This one I think is a kind of a clearer picture, but this is a little bit zoomed in, so you can see exactly where that water line stops. Each of these markings, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, is a milliliter. I can see that I have 6 milliliters and then a little bit more. It's not all the way up to 7, so I need to figure out how much more I have. I can see that I don't have 9 lines between 6 and 7. So that means that each line here is not 0.1 milliliters. I have to figure out what each line does represent. Since I have 4 lines, it's probably 0.2 milliliters. Let's count and see. Here's 6. If each line were 0.2 milliliters, this would be 6.2, 6.4, 6.6, 6.8, 7. So that is what those lines represent. Since my watermark stops right here, I can tell that I have 6.4. It's right at that line. So I'm going to say 6.40 milliliters. Let's look at another one. Here I've got something that's measuring by tens, right? Here's 20 milliliters, 30, 40. Again, this is the same graduated cylinder, just two different pictures of it. I can tell that I have more than 40, but less than 50. Let's look at our lines to see what each line represents. I've got a bunch of lines, then a long line, then a bunch more lines. So that's usually means that each line represents 1. Okay, let's count and see. That would make this 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. So each line represents 1 milliliter, which means that I have 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48 milliliters. Remember when you're looking at this that you read at the bottom of this curve, this little bubble that you see, you read at the bottom of it. So it's actually slightly below 48. So I'm going to say I have 47.9 milliliters. When you look at it, you might see that you might estimate 48.0, but it's pretty close there. And remember that this last digit is always an estimate. Let's look at one more graduated cylinder. Here we're measuring by 100s. We've got 50, 100, 150, and then 200 up here. Let's look at our lines to figure out what each little bitty line represents. Here I'm going to look at this zoomed in part because it's easier for me to see that each individual line. Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines between 150 and 200. That makes me think that each of these bigger lines is maybe 10 and each of these smaller lines is 5. So let's see if that works. 150, 155, 160, 165, 170, 175, 180, 185, 190, 195, 200. So that is what that means. So I have 60, 160, 170, 180, 190. A little bit over 190, but not quite to 195. So I'm going to say that that's maybe 192 milliliters. Again, this last digit is an estimated digit. Right, now we're going to look at length, measuring length. Okay? When I'm measuring length, I can measure in meters. Often we measure in centimeters. Sometimes we even measure in millimeters. So you need to be careful which unit you're asked for. This, you can see here, is a whole long meter stick. Right? I'm going to measure this in meters. And I can see that I don't have quite a whole meter, right? I don't have a bunch of meter sticks lined up. So I know that I'm not going to have a whole meter stick. I've zoomed in on this little part right here. I've zoomed in right there. So I've got, this would be like 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, all the way up to 0.2, 0.21. So I can see that I have 0.27 meters and a little bit more. These little markings are millimeters. And I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 millimeters more than that 27. It looks to me like it kind of goes over that 7 mark, that 7th line. So I'm going to say, oh, whoops, that 6th line I mean. So I'm going to say 0.65 meters. You could of course measure this in centimeters. If you measured it in centimeters, it would be 27 centimeters, 0.65. Okay, because each one of these numbers is a centimeter. So you need to be careful what unit you're asked for. Okay, here again, I'm going to measure in meters. I can tell I have less than 1 meter. I have 0.20, 0.21, not quite 0.22. So I'm going to say 0.21. Count the little millimeter markings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not quite to 6. So I'm going to say 5, 9 meters. Of course, you could also measure it in centimeters if that's what you were asked for. And it would be 21.59 centimeters. Here I've got a centimeter ruler. So here I'm going to measure this in centimeters. Okay, if I look up here at this big picture, I can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 7 centimeters, but not quite 8. On the zoomed in portion, I can see better that this yellow piece of paper comes right up to the 0.5 line. To me, it looks like it comes right up to the 0.5 and not over. So I'm going to say 0.50 centimeters. Again, if you were asked for meters, you could have done that. It would have been 0.0750 centimeters. I mean 0.0750 meters. So you have to be careful what unit you're asked for. Here's our final example. Here, again, I have a centimeter ruler. So I'm going to measure in centimeters. Okay, I have 1 centimeter, a little bit more. 1.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, a little bit over, but not quite to the 5 line. So I'm going to call that 1.47 centimeters. You could measure it in millimeters. You could measure it in meters if that's what you were asked for. But here, we were asked for centimeters.